and welcome to another edition of the Code Remix Weekly. With me here is Sam, my co-host, and
Hello.
I'm of course Tim to Wake. I'm going to take you through everything that's new in the past couple of weeks because we were out last week. We're back this week. That is, both of us are back this week, and I think next week and the week after, Sam, you're going to be out. Right?
Yeah, I am going to be traveling to Europe, including your native Netherlands, Tim. So maybe I'll get to hang out with you
Perfect.
in person. We'll see if our schedules align.
Yeah. So, no, looking forward to just that. And then I'll be here as regular, and yeah, we'll have some topics to cover for the next 2 weeks as well. Now, as always, I want to take you through some of the things that are new in the past couple of weeks, and for that, I'm going to take you through a couple of tabs. Um, First up, we're gonna tell you that we did a new release just today, which will be the Open Rewrite 8.32.0 release, which folds in every fix and a new feature that we've developed over the past 2 weeks. And this also includes a patch release that we did earlier, so the complete diff is even larger than that. And what I always like to see is this list of new contributors. I think all in all, we have some 12 new contributors over the various modules, and
That's great.
all of them, contributing new ideas, new fixes, new recipes, features even. And we'll take you through just a couple of those. Also, in terms of fixes, I know Sam, you did some tricky things with Maven resolving and white space handling and all of that.
There's lots of little things in there. I don't even remember them all.
No, it's which is good to have this look back every 2 weeks on what is new. So, first up, one thing that is quite neat is that Ryan Walker was kind enough to contribute to the Gradle plugin functionality that we added a while ago to the Maven plugin, which is to write data tables to your build folder. So we already had that, of course, with the Modern CLI, which allows you to do that across repositories. But we also had interest expressed from the open source community to be able to do that for individual projects. And now that we have that in both of the plugins, of course, you're able to use them exactly there. So if you hadn't explored that area yet, particularly for Gradle, you can now do so with the latest 6.17 release of the Gradle plugin. So pretty neat stuff. And of course, that gives you access to a list of data tables that we have referenced here on our Modern docs, where we think I have a total of 30 plus individual recipes, each of which outputting unique data tables that help you analyze your project, maybe find issues in there, potential issues in there, and give you insight into all that you could improve using recipes. So go have a look at that. Data tables for the Gradle plugin. Now available. Now, secondly, we also have a often asked about addition to the Maven plugin, which is that you can now pass in arguments on the command line for a single open rewrite recipe. That was very kindly contributed by Marvin, who went out of his way to find a way to provide these arguments on the command line, configure a recipe with some reflection, and make it possible to do exactly that. So this is very helpful if you have maybe a small one-off step that you want to apply to a single project. You don't want to be messing around with updating your build file or creating a rewrite YAML file. You can have this one command that you maybe share with a colleague for them to run on their own project to do these replacements. So that's, like I said, it's been asked about quite often, and now we actually have it in the Maven plugin. We don't have the same for the Gradle plugin because the Gradle plugin already requires a Gradle init script to be able to run. And if you're already going to write a file, you might as well write a second file with the options as well. So, but it is quite good that we have it for the Maven plugin right now. So have a look at that. And if you have any use cases along those lines, then of course we'd love to hear what you're doing with it. And you can maybe share that in the open source Slack that we have. Now, if you do want to do something like this for Gradle projects, then of course the Modern CLI already allows you to do exactly this, where you can pass in those arguments on the command line and run that for Gradle as well. So then, next up, we of course always release the rewrite recipe bomb, which helps align all the various versions of recipe modules that we have. So be sure to check that out as well, such that you can get all these latest features all aligned with the version of the plugin or the Modules CLI that you're using. Now, in total, we have, I think, just over 10 new recipes that you could now have a look at. Some of them are provided by our friends at the Quarkus project, others through the Axon framework, and some of them even contributed to the Open Rewrite project itself. One small thing that I contributed myself over the past week is that if you were using path.get, you can actually now use path.of in versions of Java higher than 11. So this is something that probably you're going to see a bunch when you rerun the recipes that we have for your Java migrations. So that's pretty neat, and just one small addition to a lot of composite recipes that we have. And there's more options in there as well. So we had a contribution for Maven projects in particular, where you might want to configure all your projects to use parallelized builds. You can now do that with this particular recipe where you add a Maven config file or a JVM config file, tell it to run things in parallel, and then you are able to very easily configure those aspects of your build as well. So pretty neat. And all of it coming together in the listing of new recipes in this particular release. So yeah. So then, furthermore, we had some news to share from our friends at Quarkus, who have, like us, decided to join the Common House Foundation. Folks that know us for a while probably know that the trademark for Open Rewrite lies with the Common House Foundation, and we, as the shepherds of the project, are maintaining it from Moodle. And for Quarkus, they've decided to do the same. They've published a blog that we can share in the chat here, where you can see exactly the reasoning they had to similarly switch to the Common House Foundation. So have a look at that, and yeah, just glad to be able to see that grow, and we'll look forward to working more closely together with them as part of the Common House Foundation. Then in the wider open source community, we had friends of ours at GE Pardic from Austria do a bit of a write-up on both their use of Open Rewrite and their contributions to Open Rewrite. So if you are fluent in German and you want to read up a bit on how Open Rewrite works and how the community behind it operates, then you can look at this post from Christoph Koppler and the blog post attached to it, where you can see exactly how they are using and contributing to Open Rewrite from GeoPardic. That's part of the work that they do in consulting there. So yeah, that's very neat to see, and we hope, of course, to have many more such collaborations with folks, all contributing recipes and fixes to Open Rewrite. And then finally, we have a page on the Modern Docs, which, if you're not aware, if you ever miss an episode of the Code Remix Weekly, then you can go to this page and see all of them lined up along with the notes that we have for each individual episode. So in this case, you can see the notes for 2 weeks back and further back, and the list goes on and on and on, right up until, I think, early this year that we started. So yeah. If there's any topics that you want to dive into, then the search on this particular page is going to be really helpful. And from there, you can see all of this that we discussed in the past episodes as well. So that's it in terms of tabs that I want to take you through, all things new in the past couple of weeks. And then for the main topic for this week, we have a slight change of plans. So we plan to do a deeper dive on the recipe builder that we built at Moodle. But something has unfortunately come up, so we're going to switch to a slightly different topic. But I'm going to discuss with Sam to see what we're going to do.
Yeah, yeah. So think we've had like Tim said, we had a late breaking cancellation. And so the topic we're going to discuss today, instead of the recipe builder, is YAML and JSON recipes. We talk a lot about writing recipes for code and making changes to code. But, as all of you professional software developers out there know, around all of the source code itself is a plethora of data files, often in JSON, YAML properties, etc., which configure various things about your CI workflows, about your deployments to cloud environments, configuration as code type scenarios. So there are a lot of use cases for manipulating the contents of YAML and JSON documents, just like there are many use cases for manipulating code. So I thought we would today kind of do a survey of some of the recipes that already exist for manipulating these things, and also talk about what's unique about the LSTs for like YAML and JSON, common utilities for navigating them like JSON Path Matcher, and just in general try to make sure you're well set up so that when you have a scenario where you're like, man, I want to update our GitHub actions across all 10,000 of our repositories, or I want to apply some best practice to our configuration for Azure, or AWS, or whatever it is, that you know the right places to reach for in Open Rewrite to get started with those kinds of tasks. So let's see. So I think maybe the first place to start when talking about authoring YAML recipes is, of course, to kind of get a sense of what is already available. And so I'll start sharing my screen. And any moment now, not that screen, this screen. We have in the recipe catalog, both on the hosted app.modern.io application, and of course in our Open Rewrite documentation on docs.openrewrite.core, a listing of recipes that are relevant to YAML and JSON. And the first things you might want to do with YAML and JSON are find entries, like find keys matching some JSON path. And a JSON path is a format for querying into a structured data document, which derives from the venerable XPath, which you may already be familiar with in terms of navigating XML documents. And JSON path supports substantially similar sorts of queries into a document. So almost any YAML or JSON related recipe where you need to identify a particular key that you want to operate on, either for search or refactoring operations, is going to start with the JSON path. And do note that we, have our own JSON path implementation that applies to the data structures that are found in Open Rewrite. So if you're already familiar with JSON paths from other contexts, do be aware that you may be familiar with some features of JSON path that we do not support. There are some potentially quite complicated and powerful ways of expressing, comparisons, like filtering at many different layers of the query in order to identify just the particular item you are interested in. So if you do find a feature of JSON path that you want to use that is not supported or is not supported correctly, we await your pull requests and your bug reports as always. So you can let us know. And in the main rewrite repository, there's the actual file that implements it, and there's one for JSON and one for YAML and one for HCL, HashiCorp's configuration language. It's called the JSON Path Matcher. So if you want to see the code for it and see exactly what is supported and what isn't, I encourage you to look at this and its tests, as the documentation can be out of date or miss things, but the code is always telling you the truth. In terms of like the recipes that are configured using JSON path matchers and similar, you'll get things like very common one is like YAML find value, or YAML, like just for finding YAML entries, you can use a JSON path like, in this case, $subjects.kind would be navigating into the $ means the root of the tree. Subjects would look for a key named subjects, and then kind would look for a key named kind underneath subjects. So the most basic form of JSON path matcher is very straightforward, and only if you want to get fancier with it and look for particular values or navigate into arrays do you need to get a little bit fancier than that. But for many kinds of YAML manipulation, just that is perfectly sufficient. So, you got kind of the basic recipes for searching YAML, and then there are a variety of recipes for changing keys, like if they're renamed between one library version and another, or changing the values, or deleting or commenting things out, kind of your basic create, update, delete sort of CRUD operations. And one particularly powerful YAML recipe that I want to draw your attention to is merge YAML snippet. And this guy, like we've been talking about, accepts a JSON path in order to identify a place in a tree that you want to merge in, not just like a single scalar or a single key value pair, but potentially an entire complex piece of YAML. So you can get a long way for updating config files of various kinds with just merge YAML. It's if you need to, if you need to add more than one thing to a YAML document, if you need to add a complex object, merge YAML snippet is probably going to get you a lot further than like change value, which I don't know its exact limitations, but if you are doing just like changing like a value that's a scalar, a single string or a number or something, change value is going to do just fine. And if you want to interleave data that's already there with new stuff you were adding, merge YAML has that capability. So I thought we would look at just a few of the kind of the caveats and examples of things that merge YAML can be used to do. So I have here some of the unit tests from merge YAML, where we can see, let's see, where we can see things like, starting with the YAML document that, like for a GitHub action, for example, specifies like a cron job schedule, and then wanting to, or actually this is the configuration of the recipe. That one already has it. Let's see, maybe a better example would be, I mean, you can almost fully populate a YAML document from scratch. So if you are like initializing a new YAML document, that's one a potential use case here, since like this is the argument going into merge YAML, and in this case, it's just adding that wholesale into an empty document. But you could do more kind of complex interleavings of YAML. I think this shows a good example of the power and potential of this particular recipe. So mixing in this whole lifecycle rule block and wanting to do it into and alongside existing configuration without overwriting it, like something like this, like change value wouldn't be able to do this, wouldn't be able to take this whole lifecycle rule block and insert it in here into the appropriate place. And you could even be more complex than that. Like if this before already had lifecycle rule, already had some entries in it, it would add alongside those existing entries rather than overwriting them necessarily, except when it would overwrite things that had like the exact same path to them, the exact same key, and add in new stuff. Hence calling it merge YAML.
And the neat thing here is that we will figure out the details needed to indent the snippet that you want to add at the accept level of where we are matching. And all of that is just things that you wouldn't be able to do with like textual insert and replacements kind of thing.
Yes, that's a good point. And I am looking for, there's a complexity here that trips people up that commonly I find myself debugging or explaining to people. And I know I had a test in here that demonstrated it well. I'm looking for the usage of this object identifying property value in the key. I know we have one in here. Where is it? Here we go. So when merging YAML snippets that involve lists, it can be necessary to provide a little bit of additional information to figure out which like if an existing entry in the list should be overwritten or if like this should be appended wholesale. And so like in this case, we're starting with the simple YAML document that goes like testing table, and then table has a list of entries listing different build tools. And we want to add into it a new entry in this list. And so the trick here is that like uh, is like knowing if an existing entry should be overwritten in the list or if something should be added to it. And so what this object identifying property key does is tells you which like key in the list is used to uniquely identify an entry in that list. And so if you were ever trying to use merge YAML to merge YAML either which the YAML snippet itself contains a list or is going into a place that contains a list and you're not getting the result you expect to, check out this object identifying property field. Using this is probably what you need to do in order to get it to work. So actually, let's kind of demonstrate what happens in this test case if I break that. If I take away object identifying property, so we no longer know that within this list, name is the field that identifies the that uniquely identifies the list entries. Well, in this case, merge YAML makes no change at all because it doesn't end up knowing where, how to insert this thing. So it just leaves it alone. So if you're getting no edits, and I know there's some other behaviors around this. So if you're getting no changes or changes in the wrong place when you're using merge YAML or similar recipes, check out object identifying property and know that you are providing the name of a field within a list entry that uniquely identifies that list entry. And yeah, I think that's kind of a subtle but important detail of how this recipe works that can be easy to trip over. Okay, so that's it. Go ahead, Tim.
And of course, it's very easy to write these recipes, also to write them in a declarative form. You're looking here at if we were to instantiate those recipes. But you can also write these in a rewrite YAML file. But you can still then use the testing framework that we have to verify that you're making the right changes. So if you want to really try things out very rapidly, then we still recommend that you write these unit tests and have a couple of examples of how you want things to look in the end.
Totally, yeah. And of course, you can always use the Modern CLI to test out your in development recipe or test out one of these recipes across a bunch of real code very quickly. Okay, so that's kind of the gist of merge YAML and some of the existing off-the-shelf tools. But you might have a recipe that is or a scenario that is not covered already or is more complicated than what we have here. So if you need to go beyond the level of just using the existing stuff, it becomes important, just like it is with Java or some other code format that you want to write refactoring or search recipes for, to know the particulars of the YAML LST. And in our documentation, we do have, just like we have for Java, examples of the YAML LST for your perusal. The good news is that the YAML LST is substantially simpler than the Java LST. There are many fewer sorts of LST elements. Perhaps a little bit confusingly, or something you might not expect depending on your knowledge of the YAML format, is that the root element is a documents, plural. And in YAML, and this isn't a rewrite thing, this is a YAML thing, you can essentially have multiple different documents within the same file, separated by like these 3 dashes here. So you may even see it in some YAML files that they just, as a matter of idiom or style, open with 3 dashes, but others don't, and we'll just have the 3 dashes if you want to logically separate like document 1, document 2, totally separate entries that just happen to be in the same file. And then below that, the next kind of rootmost element is the document, which contains everything that isn't divided by these 3 dashes. And then basically everything else is made up of mapping, mapping entry, sequence entry, and scalar. A mapping is a key value pair. Whenever you have, a key, colon, and some value on the right-hand side, you're looking at a mapping. An individual mapping entry is a single, a mapping is a group of such mapping entries. So one mapping is like, one is like one Java map of object to object, for example, many keys, many values, and those values may be simple or they may be complex. A mapping entry is a single key value pair within a mapping. And again, these mapping values might be scalars or they might themselves be deeper mappings or sequences. A sequence is a list of entries, and these are all tend to be denoted by a dash at the beginning, and are distinct from a mapping in that they don't have named keys, but rather kind of numeric indices. And then scalars are anything that is just a number, a string, a non-collection piece of data that does not have any deeper level of nesting. So the YAML LST is fortunately fairly simple, but it also means that you can end up writing its own simplicity. Maybe is both an advantage and a disadvantage at times, in that when you only have a few one nice thing about the visitor pattern in Java, for example, is that because annotations and method invocations and identifiers are all of these different sorts of things, just by choosing what visit method to implement, you get maybe a lot closer to the specific thing you want to change just with that one choice than maybe you do in something like YAML, where everything is represented at a fairly high level, or represented out of only a few sorts of objects. Yeah, let's see. And so I thought we might look at an example of a YAML recipes implementation now. And I thought that we would, since a very common use case for this is manipulating CI files, that we would look at the implementation of this setup Java caching recipe, which is part of Rewrite GitHub Actions, which is, as the name implies, a recipe module which contains manipulations pertinent to updating and editing GitHub Actions. So if you find yourself writing recipes that manipulate GitHub Actions, do feel free to contribute them back to this repository. But anyway, setup Java caching in particular is used for adding caches to your GitHub Actions so that the results can be saved. For example, between runs of a GitHub action, it says, "Hey, store this folder," and then you can load it later in the next one in order to make sure that that you can reuse the stuff that was there. Let's see. So this is before or after. And this is saying switching from setup cache to, using the cache here. And so this setup caching recipe, is implemented largely in terms of the YAML find key recipe and merge YAML recipe. Of course, we start by providing a YAML visitor implementation, and this guy keeps it fairly high level in terms of the only visit method it overrides is visit documents, and then it uses find key to identify with a fairly complex JSON path matcher, a moderately complex JSON path matcher, the presence of, a job.build.steps that mentions, Gradle in its run. And if it is there, then it merges in, it uses merge YAML to directly inline modify the YAML documents here. So rather than going and implementing the more common recipe here, or rather than re-implementing merge YAML here, it's used like a building block. And I think you'll find this is pretty common within YAML recipes, that they will be implemented substantially in terms of the existing building blocks, in terms of find keys and in terms of merge YAML. And this one has similarly sets up caches for Gradle and for Maven, and deletes the old kind of caching key with delete key when it is no longer applicable, or when these guys have been set up. And I guess just a couple small recipe authoring tips here that are maybe more general even than just being about YAML recipes. I often find it convenient to new up some other visitor or some other recipe directly within the recipe, call get visitor, and directly apply the visit method from it. And so this is a very common technique for reusing other recipes or other visitors as building blocks in your own recipe implementations. And there is another little subtle trick here where it decides whether or not it should delete a key. And this comparison, as an experienced recipe author, I see this and I'm like, oh, this is obviously checking if any previous step has made any change to documents, right? Because we use immutable data access patterns. If merge YAML, like if this YAML is already there, for example, and merge YAML doesn't actually make any changes, the D that comes out of this is still going to be referentially equal to documents. But if merge YAML does make any changes, which when I say make changes, I mean return a new object with different values from the old object, not mutate the old object. We leave the old object alone. They are immutable. Which means that you can do a really quick and efficient, like, are these guys the same, just with a referential equality check. Because if they are the same, they'll be referentially equal to each other. So this is a trick I've used in multiple recipes to just quick check, like, hey, did any step before now make a change to here? Like often, might have a pattern like add or edit something, or like might have a pattern like if something is already there, like if the thing I want to change is already present, edit it, and then check, did I edit it successfully? If not, I need to add it. So I often find myself having a pattern of try editing the existing thing. If nothing changed, there was no existing thing to edit, so I need to add it. And it's kind of an add or edit sort of pattern that I find coming up in a lot of recipes in a lot of different domains. So some useful little recipe authoring tips there in general. Let's see. I think that's kind of all the recipe authoring or YAML related tips I have off the top of my head, Tim. Do you have any thoughts of things that we should cover about this? Examples from your own experience of editing or writing YAML recipes, or anything like that?
So I've been going over some recipes that I wrote, and we also have some building blocks that you can reuse for common actions. So one common action that we found is, for instance, if you have a GitHub action, and at some point the maintainers of that GitHub action have decided to rename it into something else. Then it's something that we saw, for instance, with folks from Gradle, where they have commonly used actions to build a Gradle project or validate your Gradle wrapper. And then they've decided that that one is best moved to a different location. And to implement this one, we have the building block recipe called changed action, which should just give those old action, a new version. And that should now have you set to rename any GitHub action that was renamed. So for folks that want to, as you spot things in your maybe automated PRs that tell you that there's a new version of an action, but you should actually be renaming it to a different action, know that we have a very easy way for you to automate that type of change with just 4 lines of YAML and be able to do exactly this. You wouldn't have to dive into merge YAML, because this change action in turn will again use underlying building blocks, but just give you a higher level granularity of renaming GitHub actions specifically in this case. And I think with the recipe that you showed the previous one, that predates the work that we did on preconditions. And I think nowadays we could do parts of that with just a plain declarative recipe. Only looking for existing patterns, and if they are found, only then make a subsequent change. Not sure what your thoughts on that are, but it could be interesting to.
Which recipe are you saying we would do differently today with modern preconditions?
So the recipe that you showed just now, were to
set up Java caching. It did use, and maybe I didn't highlight this enough. Here, I'll share my screen again just briefly. It does use a precondition to limit its applicability to only edit things in the GitHub workflows folder. And it's very common to use like find source files as a precondition here. And a decent number of YAML recipes, because it's just so common that they need to be targeted to a particular file, may effectively duplicate the functionality of that precondition as one of their own arguments. Yeah. So this is using preconditions to find source files, very common in this domain. As in Java, there's tend to be a lot of signs within the file that are about what you want to change. And with YAML documents, well, they tend to be anything, and their particular placement within a directory structure or hierarchy tends to tell you a lot about the purpose of that document. So yeah, common precondition there.
No, good.
Yeah. So I guess do we have any closing remarks or anything else we want to add, or is this maybe a good place to stop?
Maybe a call to action, because you've seen this pattern applied to GitHub Actions specifically.
Yes.
But of course, it can be more broadly applied to anything that is a YAML document. We have similar recipes for Kubernetes, which of course is also a bunch of YAML. We have recipes for Concords and a few others. GitLab CI is something where we would like to have more coverage. I think we could very easily add some coverage there with just these basic building blocks that you're seeing. It's just waiting for someone to step up to help define the changes that you probably have to make. You have to make them in bulk. So then it's best to automate that change and contribute those recipes to us. So do reach out if there's something that you want to have covered, and we will help make it such, guide you to the correct patterns to use, and do the whatever you need to make those changes in a reliable way.
Yeah, absolutely. We look forward to your contributions and and seeing what you come up with. And if you have any questions about recipe authoring, you can of course find Tim and I in the open source community Slack or Discord channels, and ask us any questions you may have.
Absolutely. So then, we've seen this also. I think there's a big parallel for JSON recipes, similarly. So,
There is.
You'll see much of the same patterns there. So anything that you want to do there, you're going to be able to watch this talk and apply 90% of the knowledge that you gained here.
Yeah.
So
JSON path matcher works similar. It's similarly mostly made of key value pairs. Yeah, a lot of overlap between JSON and YAML, at least in terms of the sorts of things they're used for and how recipes that manipulate them look and feel.
Yep. So just know all of that, and we'll gladly guide you towards those patterns for any recipes that you look to contribute. So from my side, that's all I think we have for this week. Looking ahead to the next 2 weeks, we'll have next week we're going to look at feature flags, a topic that I'm very much had a lot of fun developing recipes for. And then the week after, we'll have a good friend of mine on, which is Marit van Dijk. She works at JetBrains, and she'll be talking about using Open Rewrite and IntelliJ to both run and develop new recipes.
That'll be really cool. I regret that I will not be there for that one, because I think it'll be a really fun and interesting conversation. So I look forward to watching that after it
Absolutely,
comes out.
Yeah. And that is a lot of fun, both in person and online. So look forward to that.
Excellent.
Yes. So that's all for this week. So thank you all for showing up, and I hope to see you next week. So, cheers.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye.
Bye.